Hey anime fans, this is Chris Bolts and I'm coming in with another video on the state of Texas, the Texas Senate Bill 20. Don't want to become an expert on anything that's going on with Texas because I don't live in Texas, but here we are. We have to come out with another video because there's a lot of confusion and some stuff going on with Texas Senate Bill 20. Now, Texas Senate Bill 20, or otherwise known as the Stopping AI Generating Child Pornography Act, was passed and signed into law on September 1st, 2025. This law got bipartisan support, both from Republicans. I think it was the Republicans that actually introduced the bill, but Democrats signed onto it and the governor signed it into law, and it pretty much did not have any type of challenges from anyone within the state that might be potentially impacted by the law. And I say that for a reason, because the anime community is interpreting that this law is so vaguely worded, it can potentially wrap up anime and manga, video games, and other types of expression up in the law and potentially cause it to be banned within the state of Texas. Now, Crunchyroll, which is the largest distributor of anime within the entire country, and Viz Media, which is a giant manga company that distributes lots of manga annually within the country, have not challenged this law whatsoever. In fact, if you go check their websites, there's hide no hair peep on this. But again, within the anime community, it has caused a lot of consternation, such that this law may have potentially forced a Dragon Ball off the store shelves within Texas. Now, is that certainly true? I don't think so, but we'll get right off into it. But before I do get into the content, do make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on those post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. Now, we're going to start off with an article here from Screen Rant titled "New Texas Law is Forcing Dragon Ball Off Store Shelves." Now, that is some wordsmithing there. The law itself is not forcing anything off of store shelves or anything like that. And I'll show you here in a minute. This article is written by Hannah Diffie. It says, Texas' latest wave of legislation is making waves in unexpected places, including comic book stores and the Dragon Ball manga. There's more wordsmithing right there. She uses the plural comic book stores, but it only pertains to one particular comic shop. And I hope I'm saying this right. Westlake, Texas. Store manager Andrew Balderas of Kaboom Comics voluntarily decided to pull volumes of Dragon Ball from the shelves. They call it Dragon Ball Z right here, but it's Dragon Ball actually, because early issues of Dragon Ball had some interesting depictions of Goku. There's some suggestive pictures of Bulma, and I'll show those here. It's from the Bounding Into Comic article here that I'm going to go to after this one. And as a business decision, he decided to go ahead and pull whatever issues of Dragon Ball he had off the shelves. And if you go down into this article right here, you'll see that right here, he acknowledges that customers rarely brought up the law. And why would they? The law has only been in effect for 10 days. It was effective September 1st. It is now September 10th at the time of this recording. So who would bring up this law? Are most customers actually following this law that closely? I would say no, they are not. And he also says that most fans likely wouldn't view the older volumes as offensive. And that is absolutely correct. If you are going into a comic shop, you probably have seen some things in your day. You're not going to find some cartoonish depictions of Goku and Bulma to be offensive at all. But he says, as a business owner, he wanted to avoid the possibility of criminal liability, even on a technicality. So he just said, we're just going to take it off the shelves and not sell this anymore in our store. And that is normal business decision making. Laws get passed all the time throughout this country, throughout the world, and businesses must look at those laws and say, how will this law impact my business? And then they do a cost-benefit analysis. They say, hey, if this law is going to be too costly for me to comply with, I'm just going to remove whatever it is that's going to cause the compliance issues and not deal with it. Other stores might say, hey, you know what? We can deal with the compliance issues and we will continue to go ahead and sell this product or provide this service. In the state of Texas, you can still buy Dragon Ball from places like Amazon, from places like Barnes & Noble, and maybe some other local mom and pop comic shops within the area that are willing to go ahead and carry this type of material. So this is not in and of itself any type of censorship, and I appreciate the fact that this article doesn't call it censorship. It doesn't say that it is any type of ban. It just says that this retailer decided to go ahead and take it off the shelves. Although it does say that it uses the word forcing. It did not force this retailer to take anything out. That retailer could have still continued to sell that product in the shop if he wanted to. Kind of interesting, because I'm sitting there saying that a Screen Rant article is, for the most part, fair and balanced. You go over here to this article from Bounding Into Comics, which I assume that Bounding Into Comics would be more sensible on this issue. But no, they actually dove off the deep end with an article that I find to be pretty disingenuous and frankly dishonest, if I could say so. Texas comic shop pulls Dragon Ball manga from shelves out of caution for new state censorship bill. Now, that headline for in and of itself is pretty anodyne, other than the fact that it uses the word censorship, because again, this law has not censored anything. There is no censorship that is associated with this law whatsoever. And we see right here an image from Dragon Ball. This is from 1984 of Bulma showing herself off to Master Roshi, and I forgot the turtle's name. And Master Roshi getting all kind of hyped up about that. He goes, whoops, can't show that in Texas. That's not true at all. You can still show this image in Texas. You can still sell the book of Dragon Ball in Texas. And I'll get to that more here in a minute. He starts off, the Spencer Bakula, who wrote this article, starts off saying, in further proof that blanket censorship, there is no blanket censorship in the state of Texas. There is no blanket censorship in the state of Texas. No matter how well-intentioned, will always have chilling consequences for human expression. There has been no chilling consequences for human expression. You can go ahead and still buy Dragon Ball and other forms of anime and manga in the state of Texas. A Texas comic book store has voluntarily chosen to stop selling early Dragon Ball manga volumes for fear that its contents could net him massive criminal penalties under the state's newly effective and vaguely defined SB20 censorship bill. Now, I don't think that law is vaguely defined in any way, shape, or form. I think it's pretty clear, and let's go ahead and go to that law right now. So here's the Texas Senate Bill 20 in its entirety. It's not that hard of a read, which is kind of interesting about a lot of laws. A lot of laws can be very convoluted and confusing. Go try reading the tax code if you really want to go down a rabbit hole of confusion and morass. Boy, that's some bullshit, but I digress on that. This is the relevant paragraph right here. Paragraph B of this act. A person commits an offense if the person knowingly possesses, accesses with intent to view, or promotes obscene visual material containing a depiction that appears to be of a child younger than 18 years of age, engaging in activities described by section 43.21-A-1-B for the best part, regardless of whether the depiction is an image of an actual child, a cartoon, or animation, or an image created using an artificial intelligent application or other computer software. So that is the law in and of itself. And so then we got to go ahead and go over to this particular section right here, which is this entire section, which I already have highlighted under Texas Penal Code 43, section 43.21. Obscene means material or a performance that depicts or describes patently offensive representation or descriptions of ultimate, and I'm not going to read all of that. You can read that right there. Let me just blow it up a little bit so you guys can see that. Or patently offensive representations or descriptions of master. I'm not going to read the rest of that. You guys can read the rest of that too. It seems well defined to me. It seems clearly defined to me. It does not seem vaguely defined. This picture right here would not meet that definition. This would be okay. This right here would not meet that definition. This is okay. All of this is fine. So there's no issue here. Opponents of the bill keep saying that it's vaguely defined, which is fine, but we need to operate within what the bill actually says and what it means. It's not vaguely defined. You got to come up with reasons why you think it's vaguely defined. Right here, it seems pretty clear cut to me as to what would fall under this law right here based on if it has any of these types of things going on. He continues on right here, but rather than only targeting material based on real world children as determined on a rigorous set of scientific and academic criteria, I don't know why you even mentioned that, because hell, you can look at a picture of a child and see whether or not they're doing things they're not supposed to be doing. The bill instead targets anything that even appears to be offensive, with the determining body being nothing more than the personal determinations of the state's heavily religious and conservative-leaning population. That's a bullshit line right there. That is underhanded. Again, like I said, Democrats signed on to this bill. Most Democrats are not heavily religious at this time, which is kind of unfortunate because they of all the nonsense that they're currently engaged in, they signed on to the bill. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the Republicans in there, they're more libertarian. Some of them might not be religious, but they signed on to this bill. Let's go back over here. Material containing a depiction that appears to be of a child younger than 18 years of age. We can use our eyes and we can see things with that. I don't even think that phrasing right there appears to be is vague. It's pretty straightforward in my view. Does Goku appear to be of a child? Yes. But does he also happen to be engaging in any of this stuff right here, or being depicted of doing any of this right here? No. Therefore, it's fine. It's fine. The more lay terms, I'll share what I wrote in May regarding the bill's specific ramifications for anime. Will the bill ban anime wholesale? No. That's their out right there. So that way, when they see individual things like a store deciding to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to carry Dragon Ball. Well, now that means that it was censored. No, it wasn't censored. That just means that the store decided that it didn't want to carry Dragon Ball anymore because it didn't want to have to deal with the ramifications of this law. Provide cover for authoritarians to ban anything they don't like? Yes. That hasn't happened. There has been nothing in the state of Texas where someone decided that said, you know what? We no longer want anime in the state. We no longer want video games in the state. There's no police going around policing stores, going in, checking, hey, do you have anime? Do you have video games in your store that we don't like? No, that's not happening. None of that is happening. You know, the bill has no higher standard of proof other than an individual merely thinking an image appears to depict a minor. It is not extremism to worry about vaguely defined laws. I think it is. He actually is responding to Legal Mindset. Legal Mindset is a good legal mind. He practices law out in Florida, but I think he's currently over in South Korea at this point in time. And if you want to check out his YouTube channel, just under Legal Mindset. Just look it up. He's a really cool guy. He does a lot of good things. He's pretty conservative, but he's also rational. He knows how to read. He's reading the law and says that this will not ban anime, and saying so is extremism. That is correct. I 100% agree with Legal Mindset. Saying that this law will ban anime and manga when there is no proof of that even happening, or even that's even being mentioned in the law, is extremism. A lot of the anti-censorship folks are being extreme on this issue. It goes further, supporting bills whose terms come down to vibes allows actual extremists, in this case Puritan ones, carte blanche to silence expression. Nothing like that is happening. This guy is quoting himself as if he's some type of expert on this issue. No, I can easily quote myself putting my other videos up here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and keep going back to the law, looking at the example that you provided me and seeing whether or not that example meets the definition of A, censorship, B, being banned, and C, if it fits under anything within this Texas bill SB20. I'm not going to go back and refer back to myself thinking that I'm the one that's the expert on this. I'm always going to go back to the source. And so all these things are just him pretty much just putting himself in here saying all of this stuff is happening. None of it is happening. Sadly, despite the protestations of many, no, not really. There weren't the protestations of many. That's why the bill passed unanimously. The bill passed unanimously because there was not the protestations of many. No one really cared about this bill. And it was in light of this bill's vague precision that on June 9th, Local Rio Grande, Texas news affiliate Valley Central learned of Kaboom Comics manager Andrew Bendera's preemptive Dragon Ball removal. This isn't even news. It shouldn't even be news. He made a business decision to say, hey, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to stop carrying Dragon Ball. None of this right here is a depiction of anything that's happening under Section 4321 of the Penal Code, paragraphs A-1-B. None of that's happening in this depiction right here. So it's dishonest to keep saying, whoops, can't show that in Texas. You can show that in Texas. And right here, it's kind of interesting that he puts that right there, but he didn't put it right here. This is blatant, disingenuous, and dishonest reporting in my view. When I first heard it was against AI generating inappropriate stuff like that, by all means, it doesn't need to do that. But yeah, it is going to affect things that had no intention in that way whatsoever. I saw people post, and here we go. And this is where we get to it. As I mentioned in the last article from Screen Rant, he didn't say that anyone typically came to him and mentioned the law. His customers didn't mention the law. Instead, he's been following the discourse from people like this Spencer Bakuli. I saw people posting that it was going to affect a lot of anime, manga stuff because it would show culturally inappropriate things on certain characters and stuff, and it would fall underneath that bill. That's when I realized it was going to affect stuff here. The discourse is what made this man go and do what he did. Not anything really associated with the law in and of itself. I will dare say that this law, when it was being debated, if it was being debated in the legislature, now, once the anime, manga, or video games come up, I think these people genuinely were focused on inappropriate images that are starting to spring up with AI, and we've seen a lot of crappy stuff with AI generated images. And they were really focused on that. They weren't focused on the anime, the manga, the video. How many of you guys think Greg Abbott really watches the anime or reads manga or plays video games? How many of you guys think anybody in the legislature does any of that? And even if they did, do you think they were really worried about that in context of what was being talked about here with the AI generated stuff? This guy is responding to the commentary that is on social media. And now it's kind of like it's being willed into existence by us constantly having this discussion about whether or not something is going to be banned or be censored, even though the law doesn't make any mention of anything being banned or censored. And so this guy took a preemptive measure. How many other more stores are going to start taking preemptive measures? And each and every time they're going to do that, all the people, all these anti-censorship zealots, for lack of a better word, are going to come out and say, see, this is the consequence of that Texas law. No, it might be more of a consequence of the fact that you guys keep opening your mouths, willing this into existence, that Texas is going to be banning anime and manga, when in fact they're doing no such thing. And Andrew Balderas goes on, there's so much media nowadays, you can't watch every single thing or read everything, so I don't know what characters are shown inappropriately, at what ages and whatnot. It would definitely be more like in-detail research on certain franchises if they're going to be affected or not. This guy does not want to take the time to sit there and say, hey, should I have to read this manga or should I have to watch this anime before I decide that I want to carry this in my store? And that is an entirely rational position to take when you don't want to worry about compliance. It is expensive to comply with laws. It is very expensive to comply with laws. And this guy just said, I don't want any part of it. I'm reading this stuff online. Anime may be bad, manga may be bad. I don't know. It may or may not happen. I'm just not going to take the risk. That's not censorship. That's a business making a conscious decision, a rational decision to not engage in a business that may potentially cost him money that he doesn't have. All of this stuff right here is fine in Texas. And this is me from a post recording. Now, I actually forgot to mention something about this Reddit article right here, and it is talking exactly about this entire situation with Dragon Ball being pulled from store shelves. And I want to just read the first 3 comments right here. This is from the Hat 2 over on Reddit. This is ridiculous. This is one store that pulled stuff from shelves. He only did it because he saw people posting that it was going to affect a lot of anime manga stuff because it would show culturally inappropriate things on certain characters and stuff, and it would fall underneath that bill, which the law doesn't actually affect unless the material falls under Texas's 3-pronged test for obscenity. That is correct. 3-pronged test for obscenity, by which it has to lack any serious artistic or literary qualities. There is so much misinformation going on about this law from people who are so paranoid about censorship. They think a law that is virtually no different than a federal law that was passed in 2003 is coming after their anime and manga. And outraged farmers are exploiting it without doing the necessary research. That is exactly correct. The Marshall Krivach responds to him, "Thank you for bringing up the previous federal obscenity law. People seem to think this bill is somehow fully unique and recent when this stuff has not been on the chopping block for a long while and still is not." Correct. It's just people farming clicks via startling headlines, which are just not correct. And I have to agree with that. And lastly, this is from Central Comp. Back in 2008, I actually begged A&N, I don't know what that is, but begged A&N and its forums to stop covering, and I think that's Anime News Network, and its forums to stop covering the Christopher Hanley case. I warned them that being constantly preoccupied with that case is inadvertently going to promote self-censorship in the industry due to the false information, hysteria, and paranoia that will inevitably emerge from endlessly covering events with ambiguous legal shenanigans that no one besides licensed, independent, and disinterested lawyers should be allowed to interpret and analyze. A contagion, so to speak. I'm glad to see that my argument holds true to this day. I probably don't agree with these guys on anything politically except for this right here. They are all correct. You are willing this censorship into existence by constantly talking about it. If you guys keep talking about it and these politicians finally get to sit down and watch anime and manga, then you're going to be very upset when they really do come out and pass a law that says, hey, you know something? We don't want anime and manga in the state of Texas anymore. So you got to stop it. I'm just saying, you got to stop being hyperbolic. There is no ban. There is no censorship. Thank you very much. I'll return you back to the video. And it goes, while no details were provided as to which specific depictions were causing Balderas' concern, there are likely the many comedic instances of a young Goku's bare genitalia and Bulma's nude or implied nude body that pop up during the hero's early Dragon Ball era adventures. Vincent specifically names Dragon Ball Z's. Exactly. It was likely this was an error, as a Z designation being the most well known among general Americans, because a lot of this stuff, the stuff that's depicted in Dragon Ball is not depicted in Dragon Ball Z. It's kind of interesting that Akira Toriyama decided that Dragon Ball would be one way, but Dragon Ball Z and Super going forward would be a different way. And that's his entirely right as a creator. This entire paragraph is just weird. While proponents of SB20 and similar such censorship measures may write off Balderas' voluntarily Dragon Ball removal as nothing more than hysterical panic, no, it's not panic. It's a rational business decision. Although his response, the hysterical panic is on the part of the anti-censorship zealots. You guys are the ones running around that keep on saying that this bill is going to lead to censorship and banning. Like it goes right here in the next clause right here. No amount of bluster can hide the fact that this is the reality of censorship. There is no censorship. There is no censorship. Any business that decides that, hey, you know what, we'd just rather comply with the law as opposed to going in there and not wanting to sit there and determine what we can or can't carry, and he instead dresses it up as though it's some type of hidden agenda. Retailers and repositories that don't have the time or money to realistically litigate the matter, choosing to err on the side of fear to avoid being penalized into financial ruin. It's not about litigating or anything like that. The dude just mentioned above, right there in a prior paragraph. There's so much media nowadays, you can't watch every single thing or read everything. It's a compliance on his behalf as opposed to a litigation issue. A lot of this stuff don't get litigated. It's right there at the point of the business retailer. Do I want to carry this or don't I want to carry this? And so this idea that, oh, well, if an individual store decides to not carry something, that means it's censored. No. You go into this guy's comic book store, he might have other comics that he's more familiar with that might have kid depictions off in there that don't meet the definition of this bill or the penal code. It says, you know what, I can carry that. This is not an example of censorship whatsoever. And we go ahead and close out right here. At present, there exists no confirmed plans by anybody, political or private, to either amend or retract SB20. That's because nobody has an issue with the law other than the anti-censorship zealots. That's it. Only the people that have a problem with the law are the anti-censorship zealots. If things start to happen because of the law, then we can go ahead and make a push to go ahead and get it amended or repealed. Not retracted, repealed. But that's not happening right now. You got to wait until this law actually is in effect before we can sit there and say, hey, we need to go ahead and just jump ugly and call everything a ban or a censorship and try to be hyperbolic on this issue, try to get people to come to our side. And it goes right here further. Comic Book Legal Defense Fund Interim Director Jeff Trexler did put out an open call in May inviting interested lawyers to collaborate in challenging the legislation. It does not appear that any have taken him up on his offer. That might be because they are in agreement with legal mindset right here. This will not ban anime, and saying so is extremism. Again, like I said, the biggest distributor of anime in the entire country, Crunchyroll, which is based in Texas, along with Funimation, which is still operable, they didn't challenge this law. Sony didn't challenge this law. Disney didn't challenge the law. Hulu didn't challenge the law. Paramount didn't challenge the law. Warner Brothers, HBO Max didn't challenge the law. And any other entity that specializes in providing children's entertainment didn't challenge the law. So far, the law does not appear to be as extreme as the anti-censorship zealots are making it out to be. I will continue to follow this. By the end of this year, or by the time this thing has its anniversary in September 1st, 2026, I'm probably going to be a Texas SB20 expert, and I really don't want to be an expert on anything in Texas. I don't live in Texas. I don't want anything to do with Texas. Texas is a fine state. Not saying that anything about Texas is bad other than the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. They don't know anything about football. Maybe don't know anything about baseball either, but I digress on that point. What are your thoughts on this issue? Whatever they are, jump down in the comments. Make sure you keep the discussion civil, and make sure you do like, share, subscribe, turn on those post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. And remember, this is Chris Bolt signing off, and I will catch you guys in the next video. You take it easy.